Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again, and thank you very much, as always, for taking the time to join me. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by author, business owner, and business coach Mary Erlain, who is here to discuss a variety of topics, including her work on generational diversity. Mary is a dynamic leader and an authority in generational diversity, leveraging her extensive experience to bridge gaps across generations in the workplace. As the owner of two successful consulting firms, she provides strategic guidance to businesses aiming to thrive in today's diverse and rapidly changing environment. Mary is also an accomplished author who has published 6 business books. And beyond consulting, Mary is a passionate community builder facilitating 7 professional networking groups that foster collaboration and growth among professionals. Mary is devoted to promoting inclusive dialogue and understanding across generations, and we will get to a lot of that during today's chat. Mary, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join me today.
Oh, it is such a wonderful blessing to be with you, Gary. From the moment we met, we just clicked.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. So the topic of generational diversity, it's something that's been around for quite some time, but I haven't had many in-depth conversations with people who are educated, learned in that topic. So what inspired you to become an authority on generational diversity, and what are some of the challenges that you faced along the way?
Actually, it comes from my first career in healthcare, where predominantly I was in family medicine. And so just naturally, I dealt with people of all ages. And I didn't just, I was not just a doer of my job. I have always been intrigued, a lifelong learner, and an observer of people. I think I get that from my dad, who would happily see my mother off to the mall, and then he would just people watch.
Yeah.
So for me, I began to notice the intricacies of how people of various age groups communicated or didn't communicate, as the case may be. And as I moved away from the healthcare career and became a business coach and consultant, as I'm doing now, I brought that forward and noticed that oftentimes that was the obstacle for people in the business world. People were talking past each other.
Right.
Oftentimes, um, they were judging each other and looking at things as different, therefore wrong. And I saw that as an obstacle for relationship building, as well as even business growth and team dynamics. So collected all of that together and began my first works in the 4 generations in the workplace. I did a workshop where a dear friend was also in attendance, and just watching this very dynamic workshop of people from various walks of life and ages, just the dynamics of the conversation that happened. When all was said and done, I walked over to her and she said, "I think you have something bigger than just this." And I kind of followed that lead into now 4 books, going on 4 books on the topic itself.
Interesting. It's so fascinating. I loved what you said, talking either at or past each other. You wouldn't, obviously you've taken some of your dad's traits in terms of, observational understanding of people. Was there one pivotal conversation, interaction moment that you experienced that you said, I have to do something about this?
I would have to say it was that workshop. I thought it was just kind of an interesting topic and perspective. But when I saw some of the tensions between the various age groups surface, I don't just talk at people and talk for the sake of hearing myself talk. I want to create dialogue between people. And I noticed the tensions surfacing. And some of these folks were coworkers, but most of them were strangers to each other.
Right.
And I realized in that specific workshop that if I can create just from a dialogue that kind of tension, I'm pretty sure amongst work groups that tension is the age diversity is a tension that's standing as a I call it a governor to growth, something like a ball and chain, just a drag on productivity and growth and relationship building. And I thought, you know what, I have some skills here that where I can help people, and I can invite people to maybe take a different perspective and a different approach.
Yeah. And in terms of that tension, did you notice, was there a pattern to it in terms of a specific generation was more open to dialoguing with other generations, or the opposite, some generation or generations were more resistant to, being open to that type of dialogue?
What I noticed is that the parallel to the family dynamics that I observed in the family medicine, the various, from literally birth to passing, cradle to grave,
Yeah,
is kind of where I traversed in my healthcare career. I noticed a lot of the family dynamics where leaders who typically were older
right,
at that time were not really applying great leadership and management skills, but they were trying to parent the younger generations. And at this time, we are talking several years ago, we didn't even have a Gen Z.
yeah,
So maybe they were just starting in the earliest phases of schooling. But when when I think back, it seemed that people who were older took a parental position, and then conversely, people that were younger oftentimes fell into um, this, I would say not resistance, but hesitancy to voice to older generation
right,
appropriately, have a voice. So there seemed to be this kind of ageism that occurs in a family dynamic happening in a work dynamic. And sometimes this very thing happens between peers, people that are in the exact same role, who should be colleagues, equals, and peers. There is this gap, and it isn't the older, oftentimes the older generation totally responsible. There just seems to be this natural course where somebody younger may not um, take the position, or sometimes they come on in a way that's like overcompensating.
right.
So there's a host of work we could go on forever in the group dynamics world, but to simplify it, keep it focused on diversity. Now we have a stronger reverse where we have leaders and managers that are in younger generations managing older workers.
Yes.
And now that gets really complex and oftentimes really messy. And I like a challenge, and how do we unravel that?
Yeah. Yeah, very, very interesting. So you mentioned Gen Z earlier, and the fact that when you started doing this work, Gen Z wasn't even a thing, or was certainly just becoming a thing.
Mhm.
So can you share some insights or unique strengths and challenges, of Gen Z in the workplace or in the world, I guess, and how maybe some tidbits about how businesses could best support this generation, best
Mhm.
get the best out of this generation?
So to take that in three parts, let's look at the strengths. First off, let's identify who they are.
Yes.
I was just at a networking lunch yesterday where somebody who was a millennial, an older millennial, was still confused at when the Gen Z population kind of formed,
Yeah.
where we delineated millennials from Gen Z. And Gen Zs are born historically, we'll look at North America because oftentimes it's our events and surroundings and um, a lot of political and external and environmental. So let's look at North America. 1997, which is putting them in 2025 at 28 years old,
Right.
down to 2012. So that is, the in America, that's typically, middle school.
Mhm.
But for the workers, and for the population in general, they're digital natives. There's never been a time that they have been without some tech or digital aspect in their lives. It's infiltrated into the school education, play,
Yeah.
you name it. And that was reinforced then by the COVID-19 pandemic, where everything, at least I live in the state of Illinois, in the United States, we were completely shut down.
Yeah.
They're entrepreneurial because they are so capable and educated, more so than the baby boomers or Gen Xers, around a business mindset because education has changed.
Yeah.
And our younger millennials and Gen Zs have invented the side hustle, the whole concept of running a business on the side. And now with AI, artificial intelligence, it's easy to create some efficiency.
Yeah.
They're independent and self-directed, and that really isn't all that different from Gen Xers and millennials because typically two parents worked, so they were more independent and self-sufficient at younger ages.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that carries through. They're very lucid and flexible because they back up to the uh, um, the digital natives. There is an app for that, but we also look at COVID-19 pandemic where they had to be at home. Now, some of the challenges that they have, taking that second part, is their lack of soft skills experience, meaning that sometimes in a one-to-one like you and I are having,
Yeah.
but if you and I were having this in the same room, this lack of exposure and maturity. And there was that period of time that they were not capable or allowed. Pandemic was a huge shot to them in their emotional and social maturity.
Yeah.
And um, the anxiety and stress, we as we get older tend to develop better coping skills around change.
Yeah.
But change for children and young adults, they are still not fully mature. And so when we have these huge political, environmental, healthcare, um, safety um, issues, they don't have the set of coping skills or age and experience that older adults have. And this has left a mark. And I'll say social media and just the online news networks have not helped.
Yeah.
Um, Bullying used to be just reserved for the kids in the class or on the playground
Mhm.
in my generation. Bullying can literally be global.
Yeah.
So you just look at volumes. Um, the world moves fast, and not everybody is moving when you're looking at different people being wired differently. This generation moves quickly because everything in the world, including technology, has just moving
Yes.
so much quicker.
Yeah.
Um, and that creates a real barrier in the workplace when we have people who have not adapted or accepted that. Um, so how can a business in your third part, how can a business support them? I'm going to say it's the title of my next book, and that is Through the Art of Mentoring.
Right.
And I know we'll get into that in a little bit at a deeper level, but um, setting up a mentorship program to close some of these gaps and even build on their strengths. Um, Realizing that these people, Gen Z specifically, um, don't need extra parents. They need leaders and managers and mentors to give them a hand up in the world.
Yeah.
Parenting oftentimes can slap it down.
Yeah.
And if you want to parent an employee, that's just setting up a huge barrier. Um, and then the lean into the flexibility within the limits of your company. Um, And right now, that's a challenge because many corporations here are pulling people back in to work for various increasing numbers of days, and there's some resistance to that.
Yeah.
Um, that's a different podcast, but at the end of the day, how can, as opposed to just making the rule and announcing it, how can you prepare all of your employees, but especially our Gen Zs, to help them understand the why behind that.
Yeah.
And your why shouldn't be because your competitor is doing it. There needs to be a why with some substance. And and answering the why, for yourself, is this really a great idea? Um, so that was a long answer to a three-part question.
Yeah, no, that's very in depth, and thank you for that. It really made me think. I was teaching a class recently to undergraduates at a local university, and I was talking about the types and styles of communication that were around when I was younger. So I said a version of like when I left the house, I would say goodbye to my parents and to my siblings, and then that was it until I got back to the house, unless in some way I went to a friend's house and there was a need to make a phone call, or I would go to a phone box and I would, use the phone there if I had enough money to do so. And I said this issue of connectivity meant something different at the time, and I still knew they were there. I still knew where to go. I still knew how much they loved me, although I probably didn't think about it in those terms back in the day. But there were gaps of hours and hours and hours and hours of where you just don't know where the person is, what they're doing, if they're okay, if they're not okay, if they need any help, just the general vibe of their life. And it's an online class, so I'm getting a lot of blinks coming back as if, okay, old man, get to the story kind of thing, and I'm saying, but this is the story. The story is that the level of connectivity, did that give our brains a break back in the day to be able to concentrate, to be, fully
Mhm,
present and
mhm.
absorb the surroundings? Probably didn't really think about it like that. But when you think about the Gen Z, exactly to your point earlier, Mary, and then, they have grown up without an understanding of a non-digital presence in life, through
Mhm.
TV. I mean, my son Leo, TV, iPad, mobile phone, constant consumption, the way that they learn, the way that they digest, the way that they manifest their communication as a result of how they're digesting things. It's just so much different. And I'm very open to understanding and knowing about that. But I've been in the workplace where I've seen challenges around that, where the older folks, they're just living different lives, so they're
Mhm.
saying, stop asking so many questions. Just do what I'm telling you and figure it out from there. Whereas there's a level of cognizance, of understanding, of of genuinely figuring out the why. Why is this important? Why should I prioritize this today rather than another thing? So it's there's a story to be told there that I think could speak to all of the audiences to say, here was our experience. Tell me a bit about your experience. Where does it meld well? Where are there slight differences? How can we learn and bridge that gap? And one last thing before I ask the next question, because I do want to talk about mentorship. I was watching a masterclass recently, and it was the Howard Schultz from Starbucks, and he was talking about just essentially building Starbucks and the story around that from a business context. But one of the things he said, one of the great failings that he said in an organization is not supporting the integration of new staff members, the transition and integration
Mhm,
of new
mhm,
staff members onto the team, of preparing the people that are coming in to say, this is the workplace, this is what's important to us, this is why, these are our values, this is how we live to those values, and not preparing the incumbents who are already there to say, we have a new member of staff or new members of staff that are coming on board. They are here to do this type and style of job. This is their style. This is what we've asked for them, of them, sorry. And this is what we're promising their
mhm.
experience is going to be like. And it just so resonated with me that it kind of almost doesn't matter who you are positioning or placing where in an organization if you do it with intention, if you
Yeah.
understand the landscape for everyone involved and do your best to communicate that and give them autonomy to communicate and integrate, at the same time, the world would just be a better place, wouldn't it?
No kidding. I just was speaking this morning in a coaching session with an owner who hired an employee for a role, and she is an amazing match for the role, but her personality is so different. She is so work, give me more work, 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 focused. And I said, I had to remind him she has core values,
Yeah,
and she's operating and showing you what her core values are. Not wrong, just different, very different. But it's your job in the onboarding process to meet her where she is
yes,
and find more creative ways in your onboarding process where the two of you can meet.
yeah,
And it's fostering that collaborative and inclusive culture, and that takes work. And
yeah,
to your point, that's exactly what the gentleman from Starbucks was talking about. Is onboarding is, here's the password to the network, and this is, here's the
yeah,
software and how it works, and here's your workstation, and here's your laptop to work from home, and your VPN, and it's more tactile and function,
yes,
and they miss the connectivity with the people, and it's there that can make or break whether you have somebody stay or somebody go. And our Gen Zs will happily go.
yeah,
The world is their oyster, online and live, and they are deeply in search for a place to be connected. Oh,
def-
one last point to your they're never unplugged. So there is that external um stress factors
yeah,
that I mentioned, but
yeah,
you brought up a good point, and that is the brain is built in a certain way, and um people that are not getting the breaks and the rest, and that has to do with sleep, but that also has to do with unplugging. Here's the healthcare person coming forward. um the mental health issues and anxiety can be self-induced by that constant need to be connected, like fear of FOMO, fear of missing out.
yes. Absolutely, 100%. And I experience that every now and again. If I'm sitting in a class or sitting somewhere where it's not appropriate to be on my phone, say in a movie theater or something like that, and then I have this this phantom vibration syndrome where I'm thinking something's happening on my phone. I wonder if I should check that. And I know that I don't need to check it, but it's
How about the watch?
with the watch. I do, I got out the habit of wearing a watch a couple of decades ago, and I haven't got back into it yet because I think that would tip me over the edge, quite honestly. But so it's not just them. There's a level of understanding, a cognizance from me. So you mentioned mentorship earlier
Hmm. Hmm.
as being a very effective tool for breaking down, for helping people understand and help people break down generational biases. What are some key principles for fostering successful mentoring relationships in your experience?
Um, First off, it's giving the practice and in communication. So in and of itself, just by having the conversations, that's how we learn to communicate, is the successes and mistakes we make in communication, and that's learning. So it also is setting the stage for mutual learning.
Mm.
See, leadership is a downward thing. I lead myself, but then I lead my team. Leadership doesn't go uphill. Management, similar. Where in mentorship, you can open and foster the mutual learning.
Yeah.
There is the opportunity for cross mentoring, and that is one of the traits of finding a good mentor, is somebody who is equally eager to learn from,
Yeah.
to look at things as not wrong, just different. Okay, you do things differently. Help me understand the value of doing that. So it's creating that cross mentoring, cross learning opportunity, which in essence is the very threads of building relationship and trust.
Yeah.
There should be goals and an outcome. It should be plugging into the vision and mission and goals of the company in some form or fashion.
Mhm.
Um, it's breaking down the judgmentalism and the stereotypes, where yes, I'm talking about the various generations, and in order for us to understand them, I put them in boxes.
Mhm.
But I've yet to meet somebody who fits perfectly in a box.
Yeah.
Case in point, I have a younger millennial son who loves um, a legal pad and a pencil
Yeah.
or a pen. He just also happens to be an attorney, but which the whole legal pad fits.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he is a very he appreciates the paper driven approach, when I can recall watching him. And I'm sitting here with my trusty, remarkable pad, which, is an electronic device.
Yeah.
And I am, by the way, his mother, and I'm a younger boomer. So when you're looking at me, you would think I would be paper and pencil. I can't remember the last time I used a legal pad. I will use Post-it notes to leave, a note for my husband or something that we need to do on the counter.
Yeah.
Not wrong, just different. So I think mentorship breaks down the stereotypes. And it creates that possibility of beginning cross-generational relationships, and then truly can help the mentor and mentee, when they go back to work, then begin to identify within their own work groups,
Mhm.
and take what they've talked about and maybe have a new approach, a new vision, a new perspective. So the principles also are giving the space to practice respect,
Mhm.
confidentiality,
Yes.
goals, accountability. all of the aspects of having a really great employee,
Mhm.
that can happen in those conversations. Um, it's a safe place. Again, this is not therapy, so there needs
Yeah.
to be healthy boundaries around the topics discussed.
Yeah.
Not that there aren't personal mentors out in people's lives where the conversation can go anywhere, but from a corporate setting, there needs to be some guardrails around the conversation. And also understand that this may not be forever.
Mhm.
So this um, mentorship relationship may end up coming, to an end.
Yeah.
Um, so truly, it is not leadership. Leadership is helping establish a vision and a course. Management is someone who is going to track and um, find the way. It's the leadership is like the establishing where we're going to go in the car in a GPS. The GPS, the manager is the turn by turn directions,
Yeah.
just like our Google Maps and Waze gives us a turn by turn directions, and sometimes it will reroute us. That's a manager.
Yeah.
And the mentor is somebody who has helped somebody to be develop themselves um, as somebody who can set into the role quite comfortably. So
Yeah.
they make the jobs easier for leaders and managers to do.
Yeah. Do you see do you see an appetite from Gen Zers to be open to mentorship, or even an expectation that mentorship would be available? I'm interested in terms of whether it's looked upon, because sometimes coaching and mentorship can be looked upon as performance management. I'm not performing in my role, therefore I'm being punished with extra work with this person who I don't know, that has to help me get out of this bind in some way. Do you see an attitudinal difference with
Mhm.
Gen Zers where they're saying, I'll take all the help I can get, or this is an expectation for me?
If larger corporate entities, and I'm thinking of a large banking firm with many branches around Illinois,
Mhm.
um, and they probably trip over the boundaries a bit too into other states. They actually are hiring a role to establish the culture and mentorship of employees. There are larger organizations that are beginning to lean into that.
Mhm.
So also, when you're looking at various nonprofits and independent groups and clubs and whatnot, that is becoming a focus.
Yeah.
And as far as the Gen Z goes, they have been used to. Um, it's a derogatory term, but there is some accuracy to it, and that is the helicopter parent,
Mhm.
where you mentioned earlier, and I believe I was smiling because I was like, that's a complete opposite of what exists today. Um, that, when we went to school, we knew where our house was, but there was no contact with dad or mom at all during the day unless something, you know, unforeseen or horrible, happened. Um, Today they're able to be plugged in with parents.
Mhm.
There can be a constant communication, and so this idea of having the people who have raised them involved in their lives all day,
Mhm.
there's somewhat of a dependency, a conditioning to that. So substituting that mentorship is not parenting, but they do have this need for constant um uh continuous learning, feedback. It is something they've been conditioned to.
Yeah.
You even look at apps or games or anything, there is this um, indication that they're successful or um, they're not successful.
Mhm.
And there is a dependency and a conditioning for that. So mentorship can truly help unwind some of that need where they are looking internally more for their um satisfaction, maybe looking in my world, a lot of it has to do with faith, so I lean into that.
Mhm.
But when they are ripe for it, because that has been their life, is feedback, and mentorship is feedback. Not all gold stars
Yeah.
and celebrations, but it becomes a trusted feedback loop. So if given well, mutual respect, and they have the opportunity also to teach their mentor a thing or two, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
And that's what this new book explains, is it isn't let's start a mentorship program today. No, there's prep,
Mhm.
and training of mentors and so on and so forth. So there's some work. It's a project to go into,
Yeah.
because it becomes a strategy. It's truly a strategic plan to mentor a community of employees.
Yeah, definitely. So this is probably a bit of a tack on to the previous question, but in terms of your diverse background in consulting and healthcare and authorship and such, how has that amalgam of the experience to this point today, Mary, shaped your understanding and approach to leadership and management?
Um, well, I remember a woman who had worked for a very successful financial firm for 25 years. And I think I was talking about leadership and the difference in leadership and management. And she said, wait, what? There's a difference? I thought they were the same thing.
Oh,
Yeah, very telling.
yeah,
Lovely lady. I'm confident she was a great leader and a great manager. She just was unaware when she was doing which,
right.
and maybe making mistakes. There's times to lead and there's times to manage. Um, and for me, leaders create many leaders.
Mm.
And I know there are several out there, but when you're looking at a successful and somewhat famous chain of leaders, um, and I have been at the benefit of this chain somewhere along the way. When I look at Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, a book I think it might have been written in the 30s,
Yeah, something like that.
he mentored Nightingale, Conant, and Paul Meyer. Now, Paul Meyer um, is pretty well known in the Austin area in Texas, and actually a stadium or building is named after him on one of the universities, um, Baylor, I believe.
Right.
And he was a quiet leader. You didn't really hear much. He created many, many, many companies along the way, but he stayed in the background and pushed others out.
Yeah.
And he mentored John Maxwell, Zig Ziglar, Stephen Covey,
Right.
and the chain goes on.
Yeah.
Um, where I have had leadership development through that. So I actually had the opportunity to chat with John Maxwell in an elevator at an event.
Oh, nice.
Um, that's what leaders do.
Yeah.
And managers, are great individuals who have that ability to take leadership, what the leader wants, and turn that into metrics.
Yeah.
And also being able to manage people and be able to get from here to here in the shortest time with the greatest efficiency and the greatest profit, whatever that means.
Yeah.
So I look at a purist way, and that has changed over the years, where in the past it was the CEO was the head and everybody else was the hands. You don't need to think, just do.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work anymore. Our if we're wise leaders, we'll also be looking for those next leaders. And really quick case in point, an employee who was a young stud in a company that dealt with vast quantities of meat, that you meat in, product out.
Yeah.
He said, if we do this, this, and this to the machines, it's going to increase the quality of product out in a shorter time, and whatever. And the man and president of the company, as it got up to him, thought about it, and he, as opposed to dismissing this young kid like, yeah, you don't know nothing, it's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So also the humility,
Yes.
as a leader and manager, to realize there is brilliance doesn't necessarily come with a birth date.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that. What a sentiment there, and I think you've hit all the main highlights there. And just in terms of even mentioning some of the major names that in the self-education, self-development industry, that have an affinity with each other, they're passing it along, they are,
mhm,
ensuring the next generations of leaders, whatever that looks like going forward is so fascinating, so inspiring, very
mhm,
inspiring, to figure that out. And it's great just to pay that type and style of attention to say, what does management mean for us today? What does leadership mean for us today? When are we wearing those hats? And does that serve us? Does that serve the organization as we're moving forward?
right.
And what does that look like going forward too? I think is absolutely a pertinent question. So one last quick question I have before we get to the contact details. Earlier, you had mentioned, the boxes of generations, and
Mhm,
you've yet to meet someone who would be absolutely just within a box in terms of attitude, behaviors, expectations, and such. If I could call it meta stereotypes, like,
mhm.
what, what does that mean, and how could we overcome these to help enhance collaboration across generations, do you think?
Well, first, we might have confused the audience, because that's not a common day term.
Yeah.
Stereotypes, are putting people in boxes. Older folks like rotary phones, younger folks like cell phones. I mean, those are stereotypes, and those aren't helpful.
Right.
But the concept of meta stereotypes is the perceptions and sometimes the beliefs and opinions that one group. So let's just use baby boomers as an example, that a baby boomer has in their own mind that somebody else thinks of them, so that the Gen Z, sees them as being washed up, antiquated, um, authoritarian leaders,
Yeah.
bossy, whatever,
Yeah.
workaholics, and what ends up happening is, I, as a younger baby boomer, um, literally this happened in a workshop where a woman similar age to me had an entire group of peers, not a manager, but peers, that she said, I think about retiring because I'm thinking that, the young people actually think I'm washed up, and they probably, they could replace me and put somebody more like them, in there. I had her coworkers in that workshop. This I was hired for working with an organization actually in healthcare,
Mm.
and they're like, "No, don't go." She built that story.
Yes.
She built that story and literally was about ready to retire, based on a story that she pick and chose data to
Yeah.
reinforce. And, you know, conversely, when we're looking at, and this what oftentimes inhibits people from speaking up is that younger generations is like, yeah, I'm just a dumb kid. I don't have any experience. Um, I'm in, yeah, think I'm entitled. And what that does is it throws barriers up. And we sometimes come into these conversations and we haven't even met.
Yeah.
And so when I've got that belief system and you have your belief system, and we're now trying to communicate from those, how can we build a relationship?
Yeah.
And so we end up self-sabotaging, and sabotaging for them, the possibilities. So it completely cripples communication.
Mm.
It's very difficult to develop trust, because those are never really positive attributes. They're usually the negative ones. And it's just tension exists where it doesn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think back to one of the points that you made earlier there, just in terms of the desire for the mentor and the mentee to go into this relationship with mutual learning and mutual understanding being one of the natural byproducts of the relationship. It really speaks to that. If you have an understanding and curiousness around anyone you're working with or for, and hopefully that's reciprocated in some way, that you then have a learning mindset, a growth mindset, and through experience, not better, just different, or not worse, just different, and using that phrase, which I love, is getting that opportunity to constantly be on the lookout for learning and
Mhm.
communication and connection. And I don't know honestly how many organizations truly think like that at their core. You could have absolutely have pockets, within various groups or teams or departments or such, but whether the organization is literally set up to promote that, to gain the benefit from that, to make sure that they hire towards that type and style is something fascinating, certainly something to keep an eye on going forward. This has been an absolutely incredible conversation today, Mary. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, learned so much, and it feels like we're just scratching the surface. Before I let you go today, how can the listeners find out a little bit more about you, about your work, and about your forthcoming book?
So I have a unique name. So it's easy to Google me. Oddly, my sister-in-law, but she has been out of the workforce, but there's two of us.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law, she and I had the exact same name,
Oh, wow.
including middle name, but I'm the only one out in the business world. So, easy enough to Google my name. The
Yeah.
name of my company is Peak, Peak, like Pikes Peak, the mountain, development strategies. Easy to search that online. And then all of my books, probably easiest to just Google my name inside of Amazon,
Yeah.
are available. The book on mentorship, I have, the cover is final, and I'm about halfway through the little formatting errors with um, the publisher.
Yeah.
And but I'm hoping to have that out well before the end of the year. And that is the Gen Z Lifeline. And Lifeline is actually an acronym.
Right.
Um, and mentorship for our next generation. Um, and I it is a very faith-driven book, I will share.
Yeah.
but it really is the core of understanding and really taking your place in a calling as a mentor. Dear friend of mine, Lois, said something to me years ago, and she was a mentor. May she rest in peace.
Yeah.
And I tried to I kind of went overboard in appreciation for her, and she looked at me and she goes, Mary, I'm just passing it on.
Yeah.
And that's what our calling is in life, is whether you're younger or older, pass it on. Don't go to your grave. Don't retire and leave anything inside of you. Pass on your wisdom and experience to others. That's what we are called
Yeah.
to do. And that's professionally as well as personally.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. What a way to finish. It's so, so true. You know, you would be doing a disservice to the world by keeping this in. So certain people who think they don't have a message, they don't have value, they don't have contribution to be able to give, think again. If you don't give it, if you think you're actually doing the world a favor by holding it in because you think it's garbage, you're actually genuinely doing a
That,
disservice because there are people out there who want and need your
mhm,
message.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. Very well put.
I love it. Mary, thanks again for taking the time. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you today.
Yes, and thank you. And I am more than happy to come back and continue the conversation.
I would
Uh,
love that. I would love that. Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.